Hello and welcome from our Christchurch, New Zealand office. I'm Ollie Law, Editor-in-Chief of Unbreakable Ventures, a threat landscape podcast and email that provides entrepreneurs and business leaders with the resource to take on any crisis. I've just gotten back from Sydney, which has been somewhat of a culture shock once again. Every time I go there, I'm always surprised with the energy and I guess also the large amount of people that are in that city. In Christchurch, it's a pretty amazing city in itself. It's growing and we're building a new stadium and all these other different beautiful buildings, and we're into our autumn period, so the leaves are changing colour and it's getting slightly colder in the mornings, which isn't great for us cyclists. But when you go to a place like Sydney from Christchurch, you really notice the difference pretty quickly in terms of the number of businesses, the number of people. There's an energy about it that really inspires, particularly if you're part of a new startup or you're changing your career path, which a lot of Kiwis are doing at the moment. We have one of the highest rates in the last few decades of Kiwis permanently moving to Australia, which in itself is probably a crisis for our economy. But nonetheless, it's quite an impressive place to be at the moment in Australia, and that's saying a lot given what is happening over the other side of the world. But as I record this podcast today, it marks 5 years since the Christchurch Mosque Attack. This was an event that changed everything for our city and probably me personally. I observed some of the best examples of community resilience I'd ever seen, or at least since the earthquakes that we went through. But I'd also seen a large level of disappointing communication and control from higher up agencies. Ultimately, once again, Kiwis showed the world what we're made of, and we bounced back with a lot of purpose and control. We connected all the corners of our city and our country to stand against such hate. But even today, I still feel we have plenty of work to do to ensure our key agencies and communities are safe. So with that in mind, I'm very happy today to share a fascinating discussion I've had last year with Sonali Chandratilake from the University of Canterbury. Sonali is a leader in emergency management and business resilience. She has over 15 years of experience across local, regional and national government in New Zealand. She's been at the forefront of major crisis responses from the Canterbury Earthquake in 2011 and the 2019 Christchurch Mosque Attack. She's faced tsunamis, COVID-19, all of the types of emergencies you can imagine. As the Emergency Management and Business Continuity Manager at the University of Canterbury, Sonali leads emergency response planning, business continuity strategy, and is an incident controller for the UC Incident Management team. She's also certified as a business continuity practitioner and a member of the Business Continuity Institute. She brings a wealth of knowledge to organisations looking to strengthen their resilience. But our conversation immediately takes a dive into the community aspect of resilience and adversity. Beyond the technical side of crisis leadership, you will hear Sonali's passion for people and community. She's worked closely with businesses and communities at the grassroots level to ensure they're prepared for emergencies and set up to recover and thrive. For example, we talk about how a small seaside community near where we both live came together during the Christchurch earthquakes. She's led a national charity, Cleft New Zealand, using her own experience as a parent to advocate for families caring for children born with cleft lip and palate. I will put some links to that charity in the show notes. Sonali's approach is practical, strategic, and always focuses on the bigger picture, helping communities and organisations be future ready in an ever-changing world. But if you like this sort of resource, make sure to subscribe to Unbreakable Ventures wherever you get your podcasts and emails from. You can head to Unbreakable Ventures and check out our weekly resource to see if this is something that can help you during these turbulent times. And remember, by subscribing, you'll get access to our free fortnightly risk email that details the top 3 emerging risks we've been monitoring during that period. Time is a limited resource, so without further delay, please enjoy this passionate discussion with Sonali Chandratilake. I wanted to start today by talking about how you got to where you are.
Yeah.
And for me, as I mentioned earlier, I've fallen into the resilience space through different reasons. But looking at your history and your career progression, you've been doing this since day one. You've studied at uni and all the roles that you've been doing it. So I'd love to just know about what's your journey and what kind of brought you here today where you are.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I did study it formally, but before that I didn't know anything about emergency management at all. I was training as an engineer, chemical engineer, following in my dad's footsteps. And of course the earthquakes happened, and do you know what? Something around me just felt like this is not my calling. I'm formally trained as an anatomist in Otago, and then I decided to do engineering. And you go through these sort of, this is for me, this is not for me, and you kind of felt like I'm not quite aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing. And then the Canterbury Earthquakes happened, and I just got put into a role through Student Volunteer Army, where I was a volunteer one day, just as a normal student. And then I was a group leader the second day, an area leader the third day. And then by the fourth day, I was part of running this operation where we were handing out leaflets, information leaflets that was given by Civil Defence at the time, to hand it out to the residents, because it was the scale of the response was so big that they needed additional help, and SVA was perfectly poised for it. So that was, in a sense, my real and true introduction to emergency management. And I remember being in Sumner, because that's where when the majority of the action was, and we had a sandstorm. I think it was day 3 or day 4, somewhere along there. And they said, with all the aftershocks, there's going to be a sandstorm. It wasn't a sandstorm, it was just high winds. But I remember sitting there and I thought, okay, well, I saw a child playing, but they were playing with liquefaction water. And we knew the toilets wasn't really functioning. So I thought, well, I wonder what's the impact of all this. And around me was just this community who was just getting on with it, doing amazing stuff. And that's when I thought, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow.
And much to the dismay of my parents at the time, I said, engineering is really not for me, because I wasn't really good at it to begin with.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to do emergency management.
Student Volunteer Army, it's a pretty significant story for Christchurch. And my understanding is it's still being used as a case study globally now. America, I think some areas of Europe. You were talking about your experience, particularly how over those 4 days it kind of progressed pretty quick. What do you think it was about you that got you to those different positions?
I think it was the situation. It was an unprecedented event that happened in our backyard, and everyone, and I mean everyone, just stood up with the best intention and with a lot of heart to do what we needed to do to help our community. So and I stepped up in ways that I thought, what is it that I need to do to help? And the response was moving such a fast rate on the ground. So this is all community just getting on with it, that I just thought this is the best way I could help. So it wasn't in terms of the titles or the responsibility, it was just what needed to be done and what we needed to do to help each other. But SVA will always stand up to me as we had the big white tents, you had SVA big white tents and UCSA at the time of the building. And I remember around 4 o'clock, I was just clocking off. We brought all the volunteers back. And every morning you do a bit of a health and safety briefing. The volunteers who are able to come on the day, you put them up and you put them in a bus. This is how weird it is looking back now. And you take them into the most damaging areas in Christchurch with information leaflets that you have to hand out in an area that we don't know what the status of it is. We kind of knew roughly. But looking back, the health and safety, like we're literally putting students up onto an area. And with all due respect, we had processes in place and everything. But it's just a sheer fact of you're taking X amount of human bodies and putting it into an area, a vast area in the coastal Christchurch. And we brought every single one of those people back safely and sound.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, if you're a bus leader, you kind of get a bit of a relief for yourself. You're like, yes, it's successful. Beyond that, you just, around 4 o'clock on that day, sorry I diverged, but I saw an entire a trailer load full of pizzas from Pizza Hut.
Wow.
I cannot get that image out of my mind. And Pizza Hut in the Bush Inn at the time said, we've got some pizzas for you guys. And it was entire, I kid you not, from bottom to top, it was full of pizzas.
Wow.
Entire trailer road for the SVA. And that's just another example of everybody just pitching in at a ground level, just doing what they could do and offer what they could offer.
You were talking about the fast pace of it.
Yeah.
Particularly after, those first couple of weeks where I remember from being involved in that as a citizen, not particularly helping out like you have, but I remember it felt like it was not progressing as fast as when you've got your own home and you can't get into your drive, and obviously because there's so many people that are affected, it can feel slow personally, but when you're actually helping, as you're saying, it's extremely fast paced because you're trying to help a whole city get back on its feet. But you've come from an engineering background and then dive headfirst into, one of Christchurch's biggest ever emergencies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of procedures that are in place. Where does the confidence and the control, I guess, come from?
I think it's one of those situations. I'm really glad that I got the chance and the huge honor to serve at that time without any emergency management experience or any qualifications or any formal education in that. It was just me as a community member stepping up as along with thousands of people were doing, just to show what is it that I can do and what I can do to help. And because I've had that experience, that ability to demonstrate that's my intention, and any layering that I had on top of it has always carried on, always comes back to that true form of a community member just doing what that person can to help. And when you look at that sort of onion layer model where you had that experience and that intent, and then you overlay with knowledge, you overlay that with a qualification, then you become the professional as a practitioner. I'm very thankful and humble for that initial experience, because I think that's what has shaped me to what was an interest, to a passion, and now to a calling. Because it doesn't matter what the titles are or where you sit in the emergency management spectrum, because we all serve those community members. So at a heart, that's what has driven me to go, well, if this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life, what does that look like and what does it mean? So for me, I've always come from that intent of service to duty to just being a regular community member. That I was in a very lucky time during the Canterbury Earthquakes. My family was, we did have power, we had functioning toilets. As much as simple as it sounds, to us back then, it was quite a lot. Then I thought, okay, well, if I've got that and I'm in a position to help, what is it that I can do? So I don't know exactly what gave me that strength, but I think all of us are born with this innate calling that your soul is listened to, and it tells you, okay, right, this is what you need to do. And at the time, I was very young and I didn't know how to articulate that or understand that to any significant means. But I trusted it, that gut saying, you need to help and this is where you need to be, and do what it is that you need to be.
Do you think there's an element that supported that decision around community and the fact that the Student Volunteer Army is that at its core? So people talk about having a tribe, finding your tribe, which can both be friendship, but it can also be in a professional setting.
Yeah.
What sort of influence do you think just being around like-minded people had?
Yeah.
towards your career. Do you think that's a major element of that?
Absolutely. And I also think Canterbury Earthquakes, during the fabric of what the understanding of a university student is, I think Canterbury Earthquakes was a pivotal point where these students are doing amazing things. We were cleaning the driveways. We were helping. I remember there was a milk run that was done. And it was university students who helped all the elderly folks along the street say, well, actually, would you like me to take that and give you some milk? They would literally bring it in. They would clean the windows that were shuttered and out of the driveway so they could get something like a walkway going. So I think in New Zealand, our perception of the typical image of a university student really shifted in that time. Yeah.
For those that don't know, because my understanding is Student Volunteer Army did start in New Zealand. It started here in Christchurch. This is one of the most amazing, unique stories we have. But if you were to explain what it is and how it really kind of started to someone overseas, how would you do that?
So I was not part of the initial group of SVA. I came in as I said, a regular UC student just wanting to help. As a student wanting to help from that point of view, I would say it's almost a kingship of being a human being. That for most of us, when something goes wrong, we innately want to help. And UV, a Student Volunteer Army, was a platform that enabled students to participate and contribute and allow a student to express themselves in that way. So the way it was set up, we were kind of working it out as it all unfolded. We didn't have a proper plan. We didn't at that time. We were kind of figuring it out as we went along. And it evolved so organically, but at the heart of it was just this intent to give back to others. And I think that's what brought us through to this amazing. UC as a whole is full of integrity. You've coming back now as a staff member, you still feel it. You still feel there is an energy here that's just got an amazing intention to give back. And as human beings, we need to listen to that a lot more these days.
Yeah.
But having those social connections and social organizations that's there, it enables a human being to express themselves and to give back to the community in a safe and useful way.
So how can an organization replicate something like that?
Comes down to relationships, I think. Having the relationships beforehand, having clarity on what is it that we do. So SVA at the time, again, I can't speak for SVA, I can only speak for as a volunteer, as a student there, it was just a place for me to go and go, hey, I can do shoveling, in my case, it was a distribution of the information leaflets. I can do that. How can I help? What's the best way that I can give my time? Because you weren't obliged to come back the next day. So we took student out to the other side of and they weren't obliged to come back tomorrow, but a lot of the groups that I led, they did. So having clarity on what is it that we do, and forming relationships on what is it that we do that's connected to the wider response. I think it's really, really critical. Because then you are this interject between the official response, although in my view everyone is an official response, but also that coordinated response. And I think SVA was one of the first groups, in my view at least, who catered that really well for in the tertiary sector, where you had this really key group of large amount of pair of hands who could help at a critical time, gave a little bit of a platform with some organizations around it, some processes and so forth. But later on, it actually connected to what the rest of the response was doing. So, we could go to civil defense and go, hey, we've got this group of people, they're willing to help. What is it that we need to do for you? What is it that we need to contribute? So having those conversations beforehand is incredibly powerful, because when an event happens, We've already got the relationships. We've already asked the questions. So it's very much a phone call saying, hey, I need an extra pair of hands. Are you able to help?
Yeah, and I think in New Zealand, we've got an opportunity where there are multiple agencies, even businesses that can collaborate together. They probably usually wouldn't in a business as usual format, but we're small enough to use that as an opportunity. But then there are still other, countries and other areas of the world that can learn from how we've done it. And it feels like the Student Volunteer Army is, as I said earlier, it's still being used as an example of how organisations can create that kind of energy and that mass gathering of support.
Yeah, it's about how we create that social cohesion. So we're shifting our mindset from an organisation to what I do between 9 to 5, but we're creating that belongingness. So something that's more than 9 to 5, that gives me value, it identifies me, it gives me validation, and through those things builds that social cohesion.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities for whether you're a large organisation or a small organisation to create that social cohesion, because that's what's going to test us, and whether it be a small disruption or a big disruption.
And how do you think you do that for colleagues who really are only working for the 9 till 5, and when they walk out that door, it's done? Because there are some organisations, and I don't know, I wouldn't like to pick on anyone, but if we talk about fast food, for example, right? And you've got particularly younger, and this is generalising a bit, but younger employees who just feel like it's not their concern, it's not their area of expertise. They're not the manager who has to deal with, a crisis that is going to involve everyone. How would you kind of approach those people and maybe try and inspire them to think outside the box?
That's a great question. It's a $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think from my experience of being part of incident management teams and being part of volunteer groups and, social organisations, particularly in Christchurch and in Wellington, I would say start with acknowledgement. Start with the acknowledgement of as a human being.
Yeah.
At the individual level. And how we practice that is, for example, a thank you. So going back to your example, fast food, 9 to 5 or 4-hour shifts, so you come in. But a simple thank you at that end of the shift goes a long way to a human being, irrespective, in my view, of what age they are. Because it's the basic form of validation. And us human species, we want validation and belongingness as a key innate of being alive. So if we can create multiple forms of validation for an individual, then it becomes that belongingness that you tend to create. And through that belongingness, we start creating connections. So there are, if we look at incident management teams, so in an emergency operations center, physical coordination center, where you have an incident management team that's operating, if I bring it closer to home a little bit, at the end of the shift, say you do 12-hour shifts, sometimes more if you're early in the response. At the end of the shift, if your response manager or anyone that you're reporting to under the SIM structure, for example, if someone says, hey, thank you for coming, doing the 12-hour shifts, thank you for being here, the fact that you're here just made us go a long way and, made things so much faster, and thank you for wearing a smile, thank you for doing, filling up the photocopy paper in the photocopier. It's always that.
Someone's got to do that.
Someone's got to do that, right? It just, those little things makes a person that much more valid, and it's recognizing it. And I mean, there's other forms of it, but I think at a very root cause, if you want to create meaningful connection and meaningful validation, you have to start with just acknowledgement. So I think thank yous, karakias, they go along. I mean, the purpose of it is to bring everyone together.
Yeah.
The purpose of a karakia.
At the start as well.
At the start, at the beginning, at the end.
Yeah.
So doing these little snippets of it, if you want to call it the daily dose, over time, it just creates a beautiful belongingness and cohesion, which naturally pivots into during a response.
Yeah.
If we don't have that, it makes it a little bit harder in the sense, you annoyed me. Hey, that is my pen. How dare you touch my pen? To the point of like, why should I put the paper in the photocopy machine? It's the other person's job. But even in the absence of those relationships, you can, again, go back to your basis of just acknowledgement. I think it's a steeper mountain to climb during a response because everything is on steroids. So there's a massive response, don't know what you're doing most of the time. And then you've got these incredible stresses that are just constricted into these really intense timelines. It can be a little bit difficult to build those cohesions. Not impossible, but it can be challenging.
And that's, touching on that point there, that's really interesting because you kind of, the importance is to build that connection, understanding, team ethos, validation way ahead of when you need it during a crisis. Because as you said, it's intense. You're talking about the fast pace of the Christchurch Earthquakes. You don't want to be building those connections necessarily when it's all kicking off.
Yeah.
So it's doing that work beforehand.
Yeah. It's it's using the pre-existing relationships that you've built to leverage into the betterment and the time-constricted pace of a response. Yeah.
So after student volunteer army, what happened next? So you've decided this is what you want to do. How do you make the decision of what you do next, particularly from a professional standpoint, and turn this into a career?
That was, for me at that time, this is going back now. I'm going to, 15 years back. At that point, it was very easy because I was studying geology. I was kind of in between anyway. And I said, no, there was a disaster management program at Canterbury University, which made it a hell of a lot easier. I think at the time I was one of four because it was a very relatively, emergency management was a very relatively new field at that time. So I remember there was four enrollments at the very initial stage. I think I was the first or the second cohort. And because of the Canterbury Earthquakes, we were all doing research on the Canterbury Earthquakes. Everything was about the Canterbury Earthquakes, and as it should be. And I remember all four of my colleagues and now have gone into different directions, whether they're practitioners or now they're actually now teaching disaster management.
Right.
So in terms of qualification-wise, it was easier for me to stretch it into my master's and then did research on the Canterbury Earthquakes. Afterwards, I had the pleasure of working in Wellington.
Yeah.
To I don't know how many councils now. Nine different councils.
Wow.
It was an honor. And this is the other thing that I really liked about my journey is I came from at a grassroots level. I didn't know much about it. I didn't even know what civil defense or who civil defense was. I was like, oh, okay. What do you do?
Yeah.
And then it went to getting some information and qualification. And then as a practitioner, I went back to my grassroots as a community resilience coordinator. So I was really in my sweet space where I was going back to community organizations. I was helping, small businesses about how do we do emergency. And it was in Wellington. So, at that time, Canterbury opened a whole new can of worms.
Yeah.
Probably say not one, like many cans of worms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Wellington was sitting there looking at this and, oh God, this is really coming our way because we knew about AFA a long time. So it was a really fortuitous and an honor to serve communities in Wellington at a grassroots level to go, right, how do we do preparedness? How do we do, we looked at business continuity, but it wasn't the term business continuity. It was more like, how do we prepare our small businesses, again, which are such a fabric of a community.
Yeah.
The local fish and chip shop, the dairy down the street. How do we prepare them? What does that look like? Are they connected to the wider community? Because the rest of the community is going to need you. They're going to need you way before what a first response is going to be. So it was an incredible time of my life where I just absolutely loved, where you took the experience of the Canterbury Earthquakes, you've built it up with a formal education, and then you had the chance to go back to your grassroots in an area that is not Christchurch. because Christchurch was still in that response phase.
Yeah.
But unbelievably enjoyed it to see transformations of community groups. You don't see big transformations, you see snippets. You see mere morsels of transformation.
Yeah.
Everything else in between is just generally hard and difficult. But
Lots of politics and paperwork. It's quite rare for someone to experience what they think they might want to do as a career, study it, and then go back to that grassroots, as you say, and be able to practice it in a professional setting.
Yeah, because then you have this understanding of what is, again, I say this with apostrophes, official response. In my view, everyone is just doing response. But you're in a really beautiful space to take the official response and then go, hey guys, this is what's happening behind the scenes. But while this is going on, this is the awesome stuff that we could do in our community. And what we're effectively doing is we're setting the pace of the official response. So that reverse roles have been it's a very humbling experience for me. Yeah. And then, I mean, at the time I was married, so as a natural progression, you tend to take a bit of time out to start a family. But I've always been part of volunteer organizations. It's just been a very big, it's been a big part of me.
Great.
I became part of Cleft New Zealand because my eldest son was born with cleft lip and palate. So what does one do? They get involved with the volunteering group, just with the intent to help out for families who are caring for cleft lip and palate, for babies. And then, again, with no intention, I was just wanting to do a bit of coffee groups and stuff like that, became the GM for Cleft New Zealand. And I did a lot of advocacy around what does it mean for provision of cleft care in New Zealand for our families.
So this reminds me of the technique that some companies adopt. I know that Google's got a program where they say between 15 and 20% of your time is going off and doing what you're passionate about. And it kind of sounds like you've done something similar, which has then also helped the work you do as a professional, as well as it stemmed from your experience of giving back to community and being part of, as we talked about earlier, that kind of tribe environment. Yeah. Could that also be another powerful way or an incentive for organisations who do have those employees that are struggling to find a place or, be part of a team that can help build resilience?
I think it's really important for organisations to enable a human being to express themselves in a form that's true to them as an individual. Because as a human being, we play so many roles. We're either we're a parent, we're a caregiver, we're someone's brother, sister, mother, father, so forth. So if an organisation is able to do that, to say, hey, you know what, 10, 20% of your time, do what connects with you, whether it be planting trees, or in my case, doing volunteer work, or they're all volunteer, but connecting with Cleft New Zealand, or emergency management. I think it sets a core part of, again, I go back to this validation. It's validating you as a human being, which you are now part of this amazing ethos of this organization. And I think through that opportunity, if an organization enables a human being to do that, then that human being is going to have a much more connection to that organization.
Yeah.
And it's that connection that's going to create that sense of belongingness. So yes, absolutely. And I think there is an opportunity for the organization to take a strategic view, to go, hey, we want to do this for our communities, whether it be either if you're multinational or located in a specific geographical location. Where are the organizations that we could support you? So have that similar conversation that I've been doing at a local level, but you could pivot that to a private entity. To go, these are a list, or these are some of the ideas that we've come up with that you can easily go and help, but it doesn't stop you from being who you are in a way that you want to give back.
Kind of leading by example.
Yeah.
So you touched earlier on Wellington, which I wanted to just come back to briefly because obviously, I mean, I remember when the earthquakes happened, I assumed it was Wellington that had gone and we were feeling the aftershock of that. So I think Wellingtonians were quite surprised to hear it was Christchurch.
Yeah.
Do you think that this very Kiwi attitude of she'll be all right or it won't happen to me, all of those sorts of things, is that real? And if it is, how do we overcome it? How do we change that perception? And the reason I brought up Wellington is I think because Canterbury was the she'll be all right until it happened. And I feel like Wellington were always prepared. I mean, they've got buildings that are earthquake proof before the Christchurch earthquakes. So it's that interesting shift on who now needs to be really concerned about something like an earthquake.
Yeah. When the earthquakes happened in Christchurch, I thought, I got slightly excited. I was like, oh my God, I got to live to see the day the AF8 went off.
Yeah, true.
That was where my mind was.
Yeah.
But of course, that has yet, and it will happen, AF8 for us. It's just a matter of when, not if. There are a lot of information that's already out there. The point of difference I would come back to is how much, as an individual, we make a connection with it. I think it's very human-like. I'm not a psychologist, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's very human-like to go, well, if something bad is going to happen, it's not going to happen to me. However, if something good is going to happen, it's going to happen to me and not that person. If you think about lotto, statistically, the chance of winning lotto, but we had this innate ability to go, well, that's going to happen to me because it's a good thing. And a bad thing is vice versa, it won't happen to me. So we're always, when we're doing emergency management or preparedness, we're always going against that innate humanness. And that's okay. Where there is an opportunity is to educate in a very friendly way that makes it more memorable for us. In my experience, I find either you create this massive, scary picture, in which case we remember it out of fear, or we create, this beautiful picture that's pleasurable and doable and happy, in which case we remember it as a form of pleasure. I choose to talk about emergency management through the lens of pleasure, although more and more I'm finding if you create fear, the brain just tends to remember it a little bit more because, the brain's job is to keep you alive.
Yeah.
But if we can create that pleasurable moments of discussion, then it becomes another stepping zone to have another conversation. So I always come back to the dinner table conversations. If we can have a nice dinner table conversations about emergency preparedness, then it becomes a little bit more easier to have another friendly conversation with a work colleague or a family member. And we usually find the threads of those conversations are done by the mother, the grandmother, the wife of the family, and the children. If we educate, I did a lot of work with schools, particularly in Wellington. If we educate our children, the children goes back and they have the dinner table conversation. And through children, it's another form of communicating in a pleasurable way.
It's interesting because I always remember at school doing the earthquake drills, having to get under the table, and you do it every year, and some years are more scary than the others.
Yeah.
And you kind of, you go back home and you tell your parents about it and what you've learned. Do you have any examples of maybe it's an individual or an organization or a department where that kind of positive drive around emergency management has then been realized in a real life disruption?
We've done work in Christchurch. I mean, this was post Canterbury Earthquakes. I did a lot of work in Sumner. And so to paint you the picture, it was post Kaikoura earthquake. So we had a tsunami. It was a very small one, very, very small one. But we did technically have a tsunami. But the response of it behind the scenes, and I said the official response, is a lot of learnings that have come from that response, and as we should. At a community level, excuse me, I remember going to Sumner in particular and said, hey, we want to talk about preparedness, and they wanted it as well. How do we do it? What does it look like? And I approached it, and this is the ethos that I bring into emergency management as a whole, is I just want to get to know what is it that you do in the community. I am here, and where is it that I can add value for you? And I don't even ask that question at first. I just go, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm Sonali. I just want to know a little bit more about this amazing community and what is it that you do. Is there any way that I can come and have a chat or come and see a community event? And I just wanted to say hello. And 9 out of 10, they're like, yeah, of course. Sometimes they're like, no, bugger off. But a lot of the time, yes, we've been wanting to do this, and we've been all this. In every community, you'll find champions who are so passionate, so beautiful and wonderful to see, but they're so passionate about what they do. And it is those champions that you want to find. And 9 out of 10, they come and find you. But if they don't find you, you can go to these community events and organizations and go, just introduce yourself and just get to know and build that relationship first. And then you ask, well, this is what I do. Where do you think I can add best value to you and your community? Often when we become official, emergency management practitioners, we have this idea that we know best. We are the official response, we're practitioners, we've got all these plans, and we're going to do this to protect you. I have approached it, again, I think it comes back to that grassroots experience. This is what I do. This is what I can do for you. What's the best way to add value to what you're already doing now? That has been a fundamental shift in my thinking as a practitioner. And I found through that approach, you come up with this awesome creativeness. And the example, I'll come back to your earlier question. In Sumner, they wanted to do a tsunami preparedness. And it was really about me going, right, I'm here to help. I'd love to know more about what you do. And they had this initiative, like, let's have a meeting. And they did call it a meeting, forget the word, but it was, let's get together and let's talk about it. And I said, this is the problem that we have. We have to evacuate your community. We might not have a whole lot of time. These are all the plans that we're trying to do. The reality is it depends on how much time that we have available. And I remember this very clearly. They said, well, how about we come up with a community idea? I said, great. What do you have in mind? Let's talk about that. And we did these series of exercises, like group exercises. And knowing me, I played music in the background. So I think it was like the 80s music. They got to pick whatever the music was. We're going to play music in the background. You get to pick. And I was a step away from wearing funny hats. I'm like, we all got to wear a hat too. Yeah. I don't think we got to that one yet. And the result of it was, they said, well, why don't we put our rubbish bins out? Like, that's great. Tell me more. What does that look like? How do we? And it was just teething it out. And this is all community. I did very little, just asking, prodding the questions. But they came up with the solution or an idea that when they needed to get evacuated out of the evacuation zone, so usually you would have people going out and into an area that's okay, the community members that are in the safe area or the area out of the evacuation zone, they would put their rubbish bins out. And that's an indicator saying, welcome in for a cup of tea.
Wow.
And this group, it was like we wrote the entire community planning, like, sort of agenda within half an hour of starting that meeting. I still remember it was in the back of somebody. Like, turn around, we just crossed everything out, literally, and said, we're going to go with a blank piece of paper, take it all out. And we just literally went, let's just do exercise. Let's just draw it out. Let's just talk this out. That's how organic that it went. So the solution, really, the idea the community came up with was that when they evacuate, so when the community members evacuate, they would go into an area that's out of the evacuation zone. And for those residents who are out of the evacuation zone, they would put their red bin out. And that's just a nice wee signal to say, come on in for a cup of tea, as an invitation, while you are allowed to go back in. I mean, if it was your red bin day, you better take your bloody red bin in.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like...
Right, bring that in.
Pretty confusing on a Tuesday.
That's right. But again, it was a very lovely way.
Yeah.
It wasn't relying on technology. It was relying on community heart. It was relying on options. So not everyone wanted to participate, then you could. You just bring your bin in if it was your rubbish bin day. And it was completely organic.
Yeah.
And we just supported that. As a practitioner, you would go and go, great, what is it that we need to do to support you? So I think going back to build a relationship and going back to say, how is it that I can add best value? And sometimes it's not a question that community can answer. It's a question that you just have to go with an open mind, without the agenda, just with the intent of service. I find the conversation just taken and goes into these amazing directions, and through those directions comes unbelievable amount of creativity. And because we explore that creativity, we create belongingness, and we create this incredible community intent, which ultimately leads to that social cohesion.
You mentioned earlier about community champions as well. And I think that really rings a bell with me, because we as a team have been trying to meet, particularly locally, other businesses that have some sort of large foothold when it comes to the response of an emergency. So you look at someone like the council, civil defence, FENS, police, whoever. And what we're doing is once a month, people like yourself as well will contact and say, hey, can we just come and see what you do? Just to understand, is there something that you're doing that we should tell others about in terms of the techniques and, innovations? And to your point, what we've noticed is when we're asking, people are saying yes immediately, and they are coming across as those champions of what they do as a living. So with that in mind, how does a professional who maybe is in C-suite or a board member, or someone who's not in the emergency team or the crisis management team, whatever, how do they find those champions in their own organisation to perhaps inspire them to join one of those teams, or maybe not even join it, but they put some sort of processes in place to find those champions that we're talking about here? Is there anything that comes to mind that they could think about to achieve that?
Simply ask.
Yeah.
Ask. Create ways to ask. If your organisation has a volunteer program, ask. Hey, we've seen that you're incredibly passionate about music, or curating, painting, and you've been giving back to the community. Is there any way that you could help us out with something that we need in our organisation? Create reward systems within your organisation. Say, hey, and it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It can be simple as, we'll do a morning tea. It can be simple as, with community groups, it's just music. Yeah. We used to have team quizzes that we used to do, and it got slightly competitive, but create these little network stations, which enables you to create the platforms to ask. Because if we don't ask, we don't know.
It's a good point. Yeah, I think you were saying earlier they come to you, but if they don't know the opportunity is there in the first place, maybe they won't. And asking and letting your team know that this is something that they can join. I think so. When I think back around my early years of joining the corporate resilience world, the number one lesson that has always stood with me was that culture of resilience.
Yeah.
And trying to build that. And that came from a guy who was a business continuity manager up north in Tauranga. And he said his whole mission outside of the tick box policies was, how do I just make my entire team passionate about this? Yeah. And the culture is, as you said earlier, it's positive at its root core. And then it sort of builds on top of that naturally from people bringing in their own skills and that sort of stuff. So it sounds like that you've experienced that not just in a professional setting, but on a local community setting as well, out in the real world, you know, where people are helping each other.
Yeah,
it's quite special.
It is. It hasn't been all, rosy. It's been a lot of hard work. I'll come back to your point. I think organizations have got a responsibility to set the scene. We have to set the scene, particularly if you're a senior leader. Set the scene to acknowledge that we are all different. Acknowledge that we have incredible stories that we come to the organization with. Set the scene that not all of us are able to contribute in the exact same way, in the exact same time, in the exact same format. If we create an environment of what is tolerable for us, we set the example of diversity is tolerable. The fact that if our lives are changing is tolerable. We have to set the expectations right of what we expect and what we don't expect. And that doesn't mean in a tick box or a excuse me, in a moral way. It's more as a sense of integrity, as a sense of intent, as a sense of this is the right thing to do for us. If leaders set that scene right, then all the operational stuff, like the day-to-day to-do stuff, I find they tend to fall in very organically, just as what a community does. And the example I go back to is it has to be structured to function. So what I mean by that is at a community level, most of the communities that I've worked with, they have got a community hall or a Sunday market, or schools, which are incredibly community connectors. And that gives you not only a place to gather, but it is also a platform to share and to set the scene. This is who we are. This is what we are about, and this is what we're not about. Just like that, organizations and leaders have that responsibility and duty of care to set the scene for as an organization. Once that happens, how we communicate, how we connect, what we give, I keep coming back to this validation because I think at a human nature, that's what it's all about. Then as an entity, we find ways, and that will come organically. But if the scene isn't set, you're going to be climbing mountains because all of us think very differently. And we naturally gravitate to what sets us apart than what sets us together. And that's the duty of the leaders to do. Where are the common threads? Find the different common threads and weave them together so there is a platform for us to express ourselves.
When we talk about human nature and the importance of it, we're now living in a world where it seems that AI and technology is the most important element of, responding and building a business and advancing and innovating and all this sort of stuff. So I wonder quickly, kind of what do you see as the role of technology in emergency management, and how have you seen that progress over the 10, 15 years you've been in this industry?
When I first started being in the emergency operations center, now again, about 15 years ago now, probably more, everything was based around a map. So you'd go into an EOC, Emergency Operations Center, and you'd see a map of somewhere or like a whiteboard, and everything was drawn out of it. Some legible handwriting, some not legible, so mine's not very legible. I wasn't allowed to write on the board. But everything was centered around the map. Now I find it's the same thing, except it's digitized.
Yeah.
So now you would see at the center of an EOC, what you would see is a big screen. So I find the same components of an EOC, but now in a digitized form. However, technology is wonderful. It is great. It expedites things very well for us. In this game, everything has to go back to lowest common denominator. And I think for technology is how do we create systems where what you have digitally is nearly functionally similar to if you had to go back to the basics, i.e. pen and paper.
Yeah.
So when I'm designing what our emergency processes are, I'm always cognizant. So when I'm building the common operating picture, i.e., the big picture of what's happening, and the tools to create that big picture, those tools, I'm always thinking about if I have to put that onto pen and paper, what does that look like? And in training, we always do a bit of both in that same scenario, so that it's not a different world. If you had to go back to pen and paper, you're like, oh my God, it's an entire form that I've never seen before in my life.
Yeah.
And likewise, if we do digital, it's like, oh my God, I've got to learn an entire new form. Something about forms, people get really stressed. I don't know what it is. It's just a form, people. But for some reason, people get very... and I've seen it from incredibly intelligent people to someone who's not very technology competent, and I'm somewhere in the middle. The forms just tend to stress people out.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but when we're designing it, it's that similarity. So how do we create that synergy and similarity between technological and the pen and paper?
So in an operations centre, like where we're sitting in at the moment, how much emphasis is put on the software and the technology versus, as you're saying, the analog pen to paper element? Is it a 50-50 split, or is it not that simple?
No, it's now 80-20.
Towards technology.
Technology.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything's, I can't imagine Canterbury Earthquakes, we did a response that was based on pen and paper and some laptops and phones, although the phones were usable to some extent because everything got jammed and you would receive a message 2 days later and it's like, oh, okay. But these days, I can't imagine a response without some level of technology. And it can be incredibly useful. I also think we need to start using it much more effectively. So making it fit for purpose, then using technology because it's technology. I think that's the biggest difference I've seen. How we communicate now is through technology. I don't think that will change.
No, we're
and
not.
That's for the better.
Yeah, it's not going backwards. It's going forwards, but we need to adapt to how, you look at AI, for example, there are significant risks with that still.
Yeah.
It's still just a tool that can make mistakes.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's shifting, but there's been this kind of idea that AI will fix everything, but it probably won't fix human nature during a crisis. People are still going to do things that we don't expect them to do. I think it's interesting to hear that it is getting adopted more, but there needs, I think, as professionals, we need to take it with a grain of salt a little bit and think about, well, what have we got as backups and how seriously do we still take those methods and how do we train them out to, the younger generation who does just expect everything to be on software.
Yeah. I also think the evolution of technology, so AI is something relatively new, certainly for me as a practitioner. I think it has incredible potential. I also think nothing is fail-safe, as what you said. Nothing is fail-safe. So it's about how we use the combination of technology, of what's pen and paper, and how we use that to better communicate. And then overlay the redundancies for it. But if those redundancies are worlds apart, it's very hard to synchronize them into a unison response.
So you were talking about the map as
Yeah.
being probably one of the most important tools for you. So is that the case from a digital perspective as well? Is there, if you could only use one technology and you had a physical map, what would that one technology be for the work and, you know, the idea of an emergency response? What would be absolutely critical?
Two things. One, a common operating picture. So effectively the big picture of what's going on. So less on the detail, but something to give you 80% of tell me the story of what is it that we're responding to. The second is how we communicate with each other, whether it be within our incident management team or within the wider community for those who are affected. Those are the two biggest things. The common operating picture, there is a saying, picture says 1,000 words. In my view, a picture says 10,000 words. It is central to identifying what our priorities are. It's central to identifying what is situational awareness. Now, the emergency management is important to note. There's different tiers. So you've got at a very local level or incident control points to local to regional to national. I think at all across those points, especially ICP or incident control points into local. So I mostly sit in those two, sometimes regional, from my former roles. That common operating picture, sets the tone and the pace for that response. How quickly we can draw that map, or how quickly we can get a map up and it's still fuzzy. So what I mean is there's so many inputs, but we haven't got clarity on that's happening. That's going to depict how well you're going to do a response. So if we can use technology very early on to build a picture and get that picture clear as possible, so we remove the fuzzy, we take the weeds out, then that gives us an incredible opportunity to set us response priorities. Once you get that, the other flip side, in my view, the communication becomes a hell of a lot easier.
And where does social media fit in all of this, do you think?
They fit in everywhere.
Because I think in the sessions I've been a part of, there is this consensus that that social media can be negative because it's not always true. Obviously, there's that facts versus fiction part of it.
It comes down to, I'll give you a perfect example. During the Canterbury Earthquakes, social media isn't the behemoth that it is now, but it was still there to a large extent. Emergency management was sending out information out through social media. What we find is every time there is a bit of an event, and this is lesser to an extent, but more during those days, an amazing social group, Facebook group would come up. For example, we give weather now, and they didn't exist before, but they would get an incredible following in such a short amount of time. And as a practitioner on the ground, I could not understand for the life of me why Joe Blogs was listening to or following the instructions of a Facebook group that has just popped up by a community member 2 days before versus an official organization who's giving information. I could not understand it at the time. Of course, now it's about, we come back to that relationship building. It's how much you build the trust beforehand. So during an event, it's that relationship pivots to trusting, say, yeah, okay, I'm going to trust this information from an official organization versus a Facebook group that popped up, and apparently they're weather experts now. and I would give them some credit if it was true, but it wasn't. And again, this creates this huge flood of misinformation, which as a practitioner, you're going up against. So more and more we build a relationship beforehand, whether it be on social media or on the ground, there is more propensity for that relationship to be pivot into a trusting information source during a response. It was bloody annoying.
Yeah, I hear that often. It's a funny tool, isn't it? Because it's the thing we were talking about the other day is social media tends to share or know something before even the news medias might, and so it has to be used. But it's one of those things you've got to take with a big grain of salt. And that,
on the other hand, it's also a source of intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
The pace of it is so much faster than what our traditional emergency management practitioner sources are for intelligence gathering. So it's a huge advantage. It's a tool. We just need to, we're a lot better as a sector, but I think it comes down to the pace, the clarity, and how we apply it. And again, that relationship that we have beforehand. So if a feed comes from a group, whether it be community groups, but we've connected with them before, then there is a lot more propensity for us to treat it as intelligence, as information.
Yeah. That brings me on to my final question for you today. You were talking about that kind of progression as well that individuals can take. What's the next thing a listener can do right now to go and build their resilience by 1% today? Is there somewhere you recommend they go and read, watch, something they do? What would you do just to increase it by 1%?
I would say get involved in your neighborhood in a way that speaks to you. Whether it be in a community, organization, or what you do in your day-to-day, get involved. Because the more you're part of a network, the more you'll build a network upon a network. And it's those networks that's going to hold you, that's going to give you that meaning, the validation. I keep coming back to this validation. And then you're part of this social cohesion that can flex, move, grow, interconnect. So take the steps to look at in a way that speaks to you, to be part of that network. And I think that will just give a human being, irrespective of where you're from, what you do, all of those things, that's just external, intrinsic stuff, the intrinsic of who you are as a soul. Get involved would be my suggestion. As a practitioner in an emergency management, I think the number one competency to have is emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And that stems from BAU, non-response, right to response. That switch that a practitioner has to make. And building competency on emotional intelligence, in my view, is number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is a book I can recommend.
Please do.
It's a book if you're ready for it. So it doesn't specifically go into emotional intelligence, but I will share this because it's been a cornerstone on my journey to build that validation as an individual and give back, and the intent that we all operate. And the book is The Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav. It's an amazing book. It took me, as an individual, personally, it took me a little while to get my head around it. And what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. But more and more I read, it's changed the entire course of my life and how I look at things, personally, professionally, especially during response. It's an incredible book that has transformed my life. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for recommending that. It's probably my favourite question is book recommendations, because there's so many books that, are still yet to be read. Sonali, I want to thank you for your time, but also I think it's really important the work you do and where you've come from out of the student volunteer army in Christchurch, because it has set an example on a global stage. And a lot of countries look to New Zealand, little old New Zealand, for advice and how are we doing things? How did we get through the pandemic? And in the last few months that I've been meeting people around, particularly Christchurch City, that community word keeps coming up, and everyone seems to know each other through a couple of degrees of separation. But the opportunity for a country like New Zealand is where people like yourself are available for anyone, not just in a professional setting, but we're all humans, we're all going to go through these things,
Yeah.
and we have to help each other out. And I think that it feels to me like that shift is happening, and maybe it's because technology is trying to almost take away that human element, and people are, as they do, they don't want that to go. It's still that social cohesion that needs to remain. And so, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and the inspiration that you keep sharing. And really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating threats or supporting in building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them today. And if you found this podcast useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or share the article to your LinkedIn network to help spread the word. After all, resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the senior advisory team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in Oceania and the ASEAN region. Special thanks to Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our articles are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the United Kingdom. This podcast provides advice and information on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is a publication operated by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.